Agrippinilla dined alone. The triclinium was dim, not by candlelight, but by imperial decree. Her stola, like the linens on the table and the drapery over the household shrine, was the same deep shade of mourning. No musicians played, and no laughter echoed through the atrium. These were not personal choices. They were mandates from her brother. No music, no bathing, and no laughter. Rome was to mourn Drusilla, and like every other Roman woman, Agrippinilla was forbidden to dine with her husband or lie beside him in bed. But for her, the silence was devastating. Drusilla had been her sister as well as Caligula's, and until she was gone, Agrippinilla had not considered just what her loss truly meant. Not only had she lost a sibling with whom she had survived a tumultuous childhood, but also a shield, the only woman in Rome who could soften their brother's increasingly erratic behaviour, who could steer him, however slightly, away from destruction. The funeral was monumental. Not since the death of Augustus had Rome seen such a magnificent display of grief. Every statue in Rome, every municipal building, every temple was draped in black. Drusilla's body, laid on a golden bier, was rolled ceremoniously through the streets, accompanied by a procession that included the Senate, the Equestrian Order, the Praetorian Guard, musicians, and professional mourners. From the rostra, Caligula delivered her eulogy, one that sounded less like a tribute from a brother and more like the lament of a widower for his lost wife. Was it any wonder there were those who whispered accusations of incest against them? And now Drusilla was gone. To whom would Caligula turn next? Neither Agrippinilla nor Livilla had ever shared the intimacy he'd held with their sister. Neither could control him, not in the way Drusilla could, with whispers, with glances, with gentle restraint. Without her, who could temper his hand? And now, more than ever, his hand needed tempering. Ever since he recovered from his own illness, Caligula had become increasingly more extreme. The first thing he did was ensure that every senator who had once boasted in a show of devotion that they would gladly take the emperor's place on his deathbed was held to their word. Each was executed, not for treason, but for foolishness, for daring to say out loud what others barely whispered. But the purge of self-aggrandizing senators wasn't enough to satiate Caligula's growing paranoia. Next came their cousin, Gemellus, a quiet, easily manipulated boy who had been led to believe that Rome had called upon him to serve. And so Gemellus too was forced into the afterlife, along with Caligula's father-in-law Silanus, and any others who dared to dream of replacing Caligula in the succession. Then there was Macro and Ennia, both betrayed, both forced to take their own lives at Ostia. Macro had believed himself promoted to the lofty office of prefect of Egypt, and Ennia, who had once styled herself as future empress, believed she would marry the man she had helped make emperor. The moment they left for Ostia to see Macro off to Egypt, Caligula had sprung the trap. He sent them each a dagger and instructed them to die. But it was now obvious to Agrippinilla that Caligula never intended to honour those ambitions. Agrippinilla saw the way her brother rewarded loyalty. He discarded it. And if Caligula could kill those loyal to him, and even those whom he had loved, without Drusilla to stay his hand, what hope was there for the rest of them? Caligula's seizure of Livia Orestilla during her wedding ceremony to Gaius Calpurnius Piso was not merely scandalous, it was cruel theatre. Not only had Agrippinilla's brother used the girl as a final betrayal of Ennia Thrasilla, the woman once promised the title of empress, but the act also satisfied his own personal vengeance. Gaius Calpurnius Piso was not just the grandson of the Piso and Plancina notorious for murdering Germanicus. He was also the son of Lucius Calpurnius Piso, the very man whom Tiberius had pardoned on the condition that he legally changed the name he had shared with his disgraced father. But not everyone approved of Tiberius's mercy. The Roman people had expected the whole of Piso's family to suffer, and many of the Rhine's legions still remembered the disgrace. And so, by taking Orestilla from Gaius Piso, Caligula enacted his own generational vengeance. The proof came the next morning. After defiling Orestilla in the very bed she was meant to share with her new husband, even as the wedding celebration continued outside, around a devastated young Piso, Caligula divorced her. But that wasn't all he did. Under threat of permanent exile, Caligula forbade her from returning to the man she was meant to marry, ensuring Piso's ongoing misery. And no sooner was Caligula divorced from his one-day empress than he turned his attention to another woman. Her name was Lollia Paulina. Paulina was married to Publius Memmius Regulus, the consul who, together with Tiberius, had brought down the Praetorian prefect Lucius Aelius Sejanus. Now, Regulus served as propraetor of Macedonia and Achaia, where he lived with his wife. But Caligula had heard of Paulina's renowned beauty, not to mention her extravagant wealth. She was the granddaughter of Marcus Lollius, the man who had accompanied Agrippinilla and Caligula's uncle, Gaius Caesar, to the east, and who had made himself obscenely rich by secretly selling access to Gaius, extorting lavish gifts from eastern princes in exchange for an introduction to the adopted son of Augustus, and by kidnapping noblewomen and ransoming them back to their families at exorbitant rates. For his crimes, Marcus Lollius had been forced to take his own life, but his ill-gotten gains remained in the family, evidenced by the extravagant reputation of Lollia Paulina, who was said to wear nearly every jewel she owned, on her ears, around her neck, in her hair, stitched into her stola, even decorating her shoes. To emphasize their value, she sometimes left the price tags attached, once arriving at a dinner party adorned in jewels worth 50 million sesterces. And so, Caligula wrote at once to the propraetor, Publius Memmius Regulus. By imperial decree, he ordered him to divorce Paulina, to return the entirety of her dowry, and to send her back to Rome, where she would become his wife and empress. But, as Rome prepared for the upcoming nuptials, Agrippinilla had to wonder, was it Lollia Paulina's great beauty that drew the attention of her brother? Or was it her great dowry? 6 months later, Agrippinilla got her answer. Caligula stood before the Senate and announced his intention to leave Rome. It was time for the last son of Germanicus to prove he could command Rome's legions. He would march north, across Gaul, meet up with the Rhine legions, and then from there continue to the sea. From the coast, he would lead his men across the Channel and into Britannia, the island Julius Caesar had twice invaded, but never held. What Julius Caesar had begun, Caligula would finish. Now, his marriage made sense. Caligula could raise taxes to subsidize a new war, but to raise them high enough to fully fund it would risk losing the love of the people. With Lollia Paulina's dowry, however, he would not need to burden them unnecessarily. Once the preparations were complete and he was ready to leave on campaign, Caligula formally announced his divorce from Paulina for infertility. For 6 whole months, she had failed to fall pregnant. Not only was barrenness grounds for divorce, but Caligula was also permitted to keep a portion of her dowry, likely the portion he had already spent preparing for his northern campaign. And to make certain that no one else could ever claim Paulina's dowry, Caligula forbade her from remarrying, to anyone. She, and what wealth he left her, were banished from Rome, yet another life destroyed by her brother. Caligula's treatment of the women in his life, of the Senate he despised, and of his political adversaries, had become an outright demonstration of absolute ownership. He had made himself paterfamilias of all Rome. Every man, every woman, every marriage, all fell under his authority, which meant Agrippinilla's own life, her marriage, even her child, were no longer sacred. If Caligula ordered her to divorce Enobarbus and marry another, she would have to obey. If he wanted her home, her son, her body, or even her death, there was no one left to stop him. Except for Lepidus. Agrippinilla cocked her head. Like herself and Caligula, Lepidus was a great-grandson of the divine Caesar Augustus. The bloodline Caligula had tried to purify by marrying Lepidus to Drusilla was still possible. Why couldn't she fulfill that role instead? Unlike Drusilla, she had already proven herself fertile, though the birth of her son had nearly cost her her life. Still, her mother, Agrippina, had survived the births of 9 children. Surely Agrippinilla could endure one more. And then, once she gave Lepidus a son and re-established the Julian line, perhaps her brother Caligula, so volatile, so unpredictable, and so dangerous, could finally disappear.